going to start, and if more people join us, they will join us. This class is dedicated to and in honor of Avraham Shmuel and Aryeh Leib. His neshama should have an aliyah. This is actually, from its outset, a 6-part series, and we're actually, this is actually our 6th time meeting. We'll see in the future. Very likely we'll continue. I personally will be away next week, so definitely not next week, but we'll see moving forward. But this is our 6th out of 6 for this season of studying together Ein Yaakov.
Where are you going, Mendel?
I'm sorry?
Where are you going next week?
It's not relevant to detail.
Never mind. Withdrawn.
Going abroad. Fine. And we're studying together the Ein Yaakov, the Gemara, and specifically this kind of Gemara. And the place that we are holding, and we'll go right into it, is a little bit before where I had the page, which is we were turning the page on Daf Yud, on the 10th page of Baba Basra. And the Gemara was talking about tzedakah, like the entire sugya. There's a few pages of Talmud here, which is, the theme is tzedakah. And we learned how there are 2 verses, and they're referring to 2 different incidences. What these 2 verses share in common is that they have the very famous words of Utstaka, Hatzil. Utstaka, you could see it in the Hebrew for those who read Hebrew. I don't know if you could see my mouse moving, but Utstaka, Tatzil Mimabes. It says it in both verses, King Solomon, which means Staka saves from death. And the Gemara says that these 2 references are referring to 2 different scenarios. Namely, one of them saves us from Mimisa Mishuna, which for those who speak Yiddish, one of the most famous curses that I grew up with in Yiddish is where someone cuts you off, you say you should die in Misa Mishuna. Right? The Misa Mishuna, I think I've heard it from Alex as well, if I remember correctly. Misa Mishuna is an expression, it means a terrible death. But that's what it is. The tzedakah saves you from a terrible death, from a interesting kind, an unnatural death. And the other pasuk is you should be saved, Medina Shal Gehenim, should be saved from a spiritual suffering, purgatory, whatever it may be. So that is what we were looking at. And the Gemara goes on in a moment to ask, what is the merit? What kind of tzedakah are we referring to when we say that it saves a person from Misa Mishuna, from an unnatural death? Before we move on to that, I want to make one final point about this piece of Gemara, which is that there's a Gemara in Shabbos, the Tractate of Shabbos. This is the Tractate of Baba Basra. There's a Gemara in Shabbos, folio 156, Kufran Vav, where Shmuel says that actually tzedakah saves you from death and not from a Misa Mishuna. It saves you from death itself, not a Misa Mishuna, which would be in contradiction with our Gemara. And all the commentaries struggle with this contradiction. An answer that some may not find satisfying, but there's an answer given by the Yereim. The Yereim, Rabbi Eliezer from Mitz, lived in Germany. He's actually qualified to discuss this topic, saving you from death, from an unnatural death, because he lived in the olden days, but he lived from the year 1140 to the year 1237. So if you do the math, he had the gift of longevity. So the Yereim, and he's one of the great Talmudic scholars. So the Yereim answers that our Gemara is actually, when it says Misa Mishuna, it actually doesn't mean the kind of death. It actually doesn't mean a Misa Mishuna the way some would the way it would normally be translated, an unnatural or crazy kind of death. It actually means dying early. That's all it means. In other words, the way that he answers this contradiction, so to speak, is by saying that over here it means an untimely death. The Marsha, on the other hand, he has a different answer, and he says that tzedakah saves you from death, meaning untimely death. You shouldn't die early, God forbid. Everything should be, you should live out your full years and so on. The Gemara's intent was that when your time comes, eventually the person's time that they're supposed to die arrives, tzedakah will save you that you won't die in mismishna. So that is how these two Gemaras go together. That Shmuel says that it's not just that it will save you the type of death. Shmuel over there in the Tractate of Shabbos says it's not just that it will save you from a certain type of death, a certain unnatural death. Rather, it saves you from death. Our Gemara's point is that when a person does die, it shouldn't be from a misa mishuna. Okay, so we clarified that. I thought it was kedai to mention because it's a famous discussion and contradiction. Now the Gemara asks, you'll see in the end of the English over here and the Hebrew, what kind of tzedakah, what kind of charity delivers from an unnatural death? What kind of special form of tzedakah is it that saves you? And the Gemara answers, it is the type in which one gives the tzedakah without from whom he gave it, and one takes it without knowing from whom he took it. And the Gemara says, those two other great forms of tzedakah, but they don't reach this level of tzedakah. What are two great forms of tzedakah? So the Gemara says, this serves to preclude the practice of Mar Ukva, who what he would do is he would personally give charity to people without their knowing that he was the donor. He would actually go around at a time that no one could see when it was night or whatever, and he would slip checks under people's doors. This is what Mar Ukva basically, this is how he gave tzedakah. He did investigations, he decided who needed tzedakah, who he felt was deserving of tzedakah, etc. And he would secretly get it through their window, through their door, whatever it was. He would give tzedakah to them without them knowing, which is a very high form of tzedakah. That no one should feel beholden to you, no one should thank you. Unbelievable. We have so many stories of tzaddikim and righteous people in the shtetl who only after they passed away did people realize that their whole life they were supporting so many people in the community. Because all of a sudden, all of the poor people were showing up at the rabbi's doorstep. You know, we used to get help before Shabbos on Friday. A check used to come in the mail. All kinds of things, and all of a sudden it stopped. And then everyone added up that for the last 30 years, it was the guy who passed away who was taking care of that, and so on. This is a very high level. But the Gemara says there's even a higher level than Mar Ukva. Because in the end of the day, Mar Ukva knows who he's giving tzedakah to. There's still an element of tzedakah where the person's own identity or ego, so to speak, exists. That I know that I'm taking care of you. And the Gemara says it's also coming to preclude, it serves to exclude and preclude the practice of Rabbi Abba. Midrab Abba. Abba means a father, but it's also a name in Aramaic. It's actually a pretty common name. Abba, Abahu. So Rabbi Abba would have the opposite. What Rabbi Abba would do is that he would actually walk in the street in an area where he knew there was poor people, and he would throw money over his back, and so on, in a place where he knew poor people would get it. So the poor people knew who they were getting the money from. They knew they were getting it from Rabbi Abba. However, the Rabbi Abba didn't know who he gave it to. Again, so much consideration and care about the sensitivity for the poor person, and not to try to build oneself up needlessly, and so on, to be an authentic individual, very high level. You don't know who you're giving the tzedakah to, but they know who their beneficiary is. So the Gemara asks, so then how should one act to conceal one's own identity and to remain ignorant of the identities of the recipient. And the Gemara says the best method is ba'arniki leisiv la'arniki shel tzedakah, into the charity purse. Into the charity purse. That's what the Gemara says. In a moment, the Gemara is going to ask that, how do you know how trustworthy it is? Wouldn't your best option to really study your tzedakah? You actually need a schus, by the way, that your tzedakah should go to the right place. A lot of people are willing to give tzedakah, and everyone has whatever percentage they're giving to tzedakah. For a Jew, of course, it should be at a minimum of 10%, preferably 20%. But whatever it is, even average in America is 2%. The average, both rich and regular people, actually, very close to 2% of people's earnings go to tzedakah typically. But everybody wants their money to go to a schus. It should be a real merit. And you need a schus that your money should take, even for your tzedakah you need a schus, not just for your own parnasa. It's a big deal whether someone made the right choices of tzedakah and so on. So the Gemara is going to ask in a moment, if you don't know where your money is going to, then maybe that's not the best way to do it. But in any event, the Gemara says the highest level of tzedakah is that you don't know who it's going to, the person receiving doesn't know where they're getting it from, and so on. Tosfos asked the question here. Tosfos is the main commentary, besides for Rashi, on the Talmud, on the Gemara, from the 12th century, the yeshivas of France. So Tosfos asked the question, he says, I don't understand. We said that there's two forms of tzedakah, at least discussed in our Gemara. One of them is that it saves matzilase midina shel Gehenim, that it saves from the punishment of Gehenim. And the other one is matzilase, it saves from a misa mishuna, from an unnatural death, whatever that means, based on the different interpretations mentioned above. Tosfos says, I don't understand. Seemingly, what's a greater schus? What's a greater thing? To be saved from Gehenna, from in heaven and Shemayim, from punishment. What do you mean? The Gemara says, what high level of tzedakah does it take for you to be saved from a misa mishuna? Seemingly, it should have been the reverse. The other, to be saved from Gehenim, should require a greater form of tzedakah, a greater kind of tzedakah. And the answer that Tosfos answers, very interesting. Tosfos answers, Rabbeinu Yitzchak, and he says that most of our merits in life serve us after we die. These are spiritual, we're accruing spiritual things. There are spiritual accomplishments that we're doing in the world. Everything we do in the world is a spiritual accomplishment. This whole world is a battle, is a spiritual battle. A lot of people think that the challenges that they're facing in life and that the things that they're dealing with, and even on a national scale, everything is a spiritual thing. Being that everything is a spiritual thing ultimately and fundamentally, therefore there's no surprise that it would stand up for them after they die, because that's the nature of it. But in this world, says Tosfos, things, only mitzvahs gedolos, to quote his words on the Gemara. Ein oimdin la'adam ela mitzvahs gedolos. Only big mitzvahs will stand up and change a person's destiny in this world. And therefore, the Gemara's question was, what form of tzedakah would be able to have this effect, a physical effect, to save a person from a misa mishuna? And it goes on to give an answer that you give it and you don't know who you're giving it to. You take it and you don't know who you're taking it from. Now, even if you go to halacha, it's brought down in the Code of Jewish Law and in the Rambam, in the laws of giving to poor, the laws of tzedakah, the Rambam actually breaks it down for us and tells us that there's actually 8 levels of tzedakah, one higher than the next, and he goes through them. And the Rambam says, what is the highest form of tzedakah? And this is something that people should be aware of, and it's an unbelievable form of tzedakah, is that not to the person, if you care about someone, you don't want them to be independent. Only people who don't care about people completely would want them to be independent. You want them to be independent. And And therefore, making a loan is actually a greater form of tzedakah than charity. You're forcing the person to get on his feet, to invest, to do something, to make a partnership with a person, to provide the person with a job, give them a job. That is, of course, and this is obvious. The Rambam says this is ma'ila g'doila she'en l'ma'ila mimeno. He said the Rambam said this is no greater form no greater thing that you could do. Below this is the level that we're discussing by us. That what do you give the tzedakah, and the poor person doesn't know who received, and the poor person doesn't know who they're receiving from, and you don't know who you're giving to. The level beneath that, see, here's interesting. I don't know what you would consider. Which one is greater, Mar Ukva or Rabbi Abba? Between the two, if anybody has any suggestion, they're welcome to say. You can unmute yourself. But which one do you think is greater, where you give and the person doesn't know they're receiving, or that you don't know but the person receiving knows? Right? In other words, you could cancel one out or one or the other. The giver doesn't know who the receiver is, or the receiver doesn't know who the giver is. So I'll tell you what the Rambam says. The Rambam says, interestingly enough, that the giver knowing who he gave to, and the poor person not knowing who he took from. And he says this is what the Gedolei HaChachamim, the great rabbis, used to do. They used to go quietly and drop money off in the doorways of poor people. And the Rambam even says this is the only place where he adds this, because this is what's fitting to do. This is a very fitting to do. Beneath this, the fourth level from the top, the Rambam, is that the poor person knows what they're taking from, but the giver doesn't know who's receiving it. In the end of the day, it would turn out, according to the Rambam, that the main thing that we're trying to accomplish, seemingly, is that the poor person shouldn't feel any sense of degradation, any sense of being. They don't even know who they got it from. They don't even know who they should be thanking. Versus if they know who their benefactor is, even if the benefactor doesn't know who they are, there's still a form of degradation, perhaps. That's just a thought. And the final four levels are the basic things, right? In other words, you give to a person before they ask you even. That's the fifth from the top. Right, the fifth from the top is where you give the poor person money, so everyone knows what's happening. But before the person asks you, you just stuff it in their pocket. You stuff it. You write them a check. You just give it to them. You don't need them to ask you, because asking, of course, is a very hard thing to do, a very sensitive thing. Beneath that, number 6 is to give the person after they ask. And less than that, number 7 is to give him less than he wants or needs. Just give him a token, but you make him feel good. You smile, give him a nice face. And the lowest level is that you don't smile. You just give the person $1, less than they need, less than that's fitting for them. But and you're not happy, you just give it. These are the 8 levels discussed in the Rambam. These values, this value of not feeling egotistical and being full of yourself and feeling that you're the giver, and so on. Indeed, is that a question? I'm seeing.
Yeah, I have a question. Somebody that has a lot of pride that won't accept tzedakah. Is that an issue that's spoken of?
Very much so. In fact, typically it says the way to deal with that in Gemara is to actually give them a loan, but never. But if you intend for tzedakah, you know there are loans that you know in advance before you give the loan. There's no guarantee for your money back, right? So when you have such a situation, don't go into the loan and get all angry when you don't get it back. In other words, think of it as stuck in your own mind. But to make the person feel good, tell them that you'll pay me back at your convenience. I believe you're going to pay me back. And by the way, if it truly is such a person with that kind of integrity, that they wouldn't take $1 from anyone, chances are, even if not in the near future, but even in 5 years from now, they're going to come back with your money. Because it's been weighing on them, it's sitting on their head. People don't want to feel like I took money from someone. But that is actually the best way to deal with that kind of situation where a person, has too much pride and they can't ask for money. So a lot of people can't do it. And it's a good thing, it's a natural and a beautiful thing. Now this value of the giving of tzedakah in such a way, not trying to build up your own ego. It's all about you, and the person should not feel subservient to you. This is actually extended. I saw a fascinating talk from the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and he extends it also when you teach Torah, and it's relevant to classes online and to radio. A talk they gave in the winter of 1966. And basically, when you teach Torah, you could feel very good about yourself because I taught you Torah and I built you up. And look at my growth, look at my accomplishments, look at what I've caused to happen. I'm such a great teacher. And also the one who receives the Torah, he has to have a certain sense of subservience, or that he's the receiver, and he has to have he's lower than the giver, and therefore, in a way, the Rebbe was saying the greatest form of Torah could be considered when it's over the radio. Then it was the radio. Now it would be the internet, because it has this quality described in our Gemara that the giver.
Mendel, you froze.
Element. Sorry?
You're all back. Okay.
And only if I freeze for an extended period of time, because then it's probably a deeper problem. Otherwise, it's just a few seconds. And even from the receiver's end, it would seem that you feel less like this is the giver and I'm the receiver. It's more a person is he's searching what's out there and he's picking up on different ideas. But it's a way to make it more special. What we do when a person teaches over the internet, sends out a message over the radio, over the internet, it has some greatness to it that is described in our Gemara. Fine. In any event, moving right along, the Gemara asks the question that we noted a moment ago. The Gemara raises an objection from what is taught in the Braisa. Very interesting Braisa. Very interesting Braisa. The Gemara itself was edited and completed in the year 450, 500. Braisa is from the earlier generation. Braisa is from the same generation as the Mishnah. So it's from the second century rabbis and first century rabbis. So the Gemara now brings the Braisa. Raised an objection. The Gemara, the Braisa says the following. And by the way, many times you could see that it's a Braisa because it's written in Hebrew versus the Aramaic. Because it was written in Eretz Yisrael, in the land of Israel, and things were still being written in pure Hebrew. And the Braisa says, "Ma yasa adam v'yiloi banim schadim." What should a person do if they want to have banim schadim? They want a male offspring specifically. What is the particular mitzvah? In Yiddishkeit, in Judaism, the way it works is that there's two things that have to happen simultaneously. One has to make a physical vessel. A person can't say, I want parnasa, God send me the money. No, it says clearly in the Torah you have to work. To quote the very verse, The Lord your God will bless you in all that you shall do. In other words, you have to do. However, we view your actions and your doing merely as a vessel. You're doing it because it's a mitzvah. For whatever reason, the divine plan is that it should have a plausible deniability, if you will. It should come through the garments of nature. It should make sense in the natural order. But it's not that the actual blessing is coming from what you're doing. The blessing comes from Hashem. And that's why a person who stays hyper-focused on their job and so on, rather than focusing on their relationship with God, it's a little bit like a person who's obsessing over creating a bank account without actually providing the funds to go into the bank account. At the end of the day, what we do is we make a vessel. But it's God who provides the blessing, which is why there's two things that work in tandem. There's the natural order that we undertake, that we do. And then there's the question which is found in the Gemara all the time, and even in our own lives when a struggle happens. We ask ourselves, what is the spiritual message for me? What do I need to change in my life spiritually? What do I need to do? So the Gemara here asks, a person wants male children, male offspring, what should they do? Rabbi Eliezer says he should distribute his money liberally among the poor. Okay, that's how they translated it. To be more accurate, in the Hebrew, Yefazer ma'isav la'aniyim. Yefazer means scatter your money to the aniyim. Right? Give it in a way of pizer. Throw away your money to aniyim. We'll say in a second why that would help a person have male children. Rabbi Yeshua says he should gladden his wife, he should give his wife joy, yisamach ishtoi lidbar mitzvah, before engaging in the mitzvah, which is a term for intimate relations. Make your wife, give her simcha, yisamach ishtoi. Thirdly and lastly, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov's opinion. Rabbi Eliezer, the son of Yaakov, says a person should not donate money, a pruta, to the charity purse, to Arniki Shal Tzedakah, unless the person in charge is a trusted individual like Rabbi Hananya ben Tadia, is a supervisor. When you give it to a person who's truly a true administrator, or a person that you truly trust, that is the vessel to have, giving your tzedakah to such a place, that is the vessel to have children, banim scharim. So the question of the Gemara, why did we bring up this brisa? So we'll read what it says here in English. This seems to indicate that putting money into the charity box, the Arniki Shal Tzedakah, is not always preferred. So the Gemara answers, agree, exactly what the brisa said. When we say that putting money into the charity box is the preferred way to give tzedakah, and that this is the level of tzedakah which saves you from a misa, mishuna, etc., what it says, this is referring to when a man like Rabbi Hananya ben Tadia is appointed as a supervisor over it. But indeed, if you don't have such an individual that you can truly trust, you don't have such an organization that you feel that you truly trust, then you go in the order of the Rambam, right? Which the next best thing to do, as we quoted from the Rambam, is for you then to give your money to the poor person without the poor person knowing where their money is coming from. Okay. Now, in terms of the brisa itself, fascinating brisa. Very interesting brisa. So, first off the bat, the Maharal's explanation for what the connection is to banim scharim, the male, is that he says that a key attribute in the personality of a male is to be a giver. If he's not giving, he doesn't feel like he's himself. That's a male attribute. Which is why, of course, you'll have women who are more manly, masculine, men who are more feminine. But we're talking in very theoretical and also practical terms for the vast majority of people. The masculine energy versus the feminine energy. Which is why a man, for example, in a relationship doesn't want to be cared for in the way a woman does. He doesn't want it. A man whose wife worries about him, it actually there's nothing that he'll find more disturbing in his life. He doesn't want you worrying about him, right? He wants to hear that you're taken care of, right? That this is a nature of a man. That he wants to feel like he's a mashpia, a giver. And so the Maharal explains that giving tzedakah in its core is really about being a giver. That's what it is. And not only just being like giving tzedakah. That's not what he says. If you look closely, mefazer sees their identity as a giver. My job in life is to take charge and to take care of everybody else. Use themselves. Being that a person does that, whole merit that Hashem will give him banim scharim. That's a vart from the Maharal of Prague. Off the bat, an idea. There are those who say that the two things pointed out in the Gemara, that the first one says that you give your money to the Ani. Rabbi Yeshua says you gladden your wife before the mitzvah, l'dvar mitzvah. They work in tandem. That actually one of them is the natural vessel, and one of them is the supernatural vessel, the spiritual accomplishment which will help you have banim scharim. The spiritual is giving money. Yifazer mamin la'anim. The physical thing is actually yisamach ishtay l'dvar mitzvah. Is actually yisamach ishtay l'dvar mitzvah. And what is this based upon? So it's actually based upon a different Gemara, actually in the Tractate of Nida, Daf Ayin, folio 70. But it's basically a concept in Chazal, whoever, in intimate relations, whoever orgasms first, it's going to be the opposite gender. So if the woman orgasms, it's going to be a male, and if the man, it's going to be a female. And based on that concept, what the Gemara over here is saying is that when you samach ishtil bar mitzvah, when a man makes his wife extremely happy and comfortable, and etc., then she's going to be mazriya tchila. She's going to orgasm first, and therefore it's going to be banim scharim. This is the natural way. This is the thing that a person should be doing if they want to have male children. I've heard an explanation once scientifically, and if we have any scientists or doctors who disagree, then let you know. 1 second. What was it? I think it's like this. I think scientifically, the spermosa of the male ones, XX and XY, the male ones are actually they could survive more, they're actually stronger, but the female ones are faster. They go faster, and therefore, when it actually creates a lot of toxins or whatever, makes it more difficult for the sperm, and therefore the ones that will survive, the ones who will impregnate the woman and gives them more of a chance, is the male sperm. But if the woman doesn't orgasm first, the ones which are quicker are actually the women, the XX, and therefore, and that's why more likely that the child's going to be a female. An idea, has to be looked into more. But in any event, this is the concept that the Gemara is referring to. Is samach ishtel dvar mitzvah, and so on. So now like this, it's actually very interesting. There are svarim which say that this is actually the source of what it says in Maimonides, that there's a mitzvah to make for a man to make his wife happy and rejoice and besimcha, especially and specifically when they're having relations. intimacy. We're familiar with an obligation in the Shana Rishayim, the first year a person is married to make his wife happy. But if you, in the Rambam in Hilchos Ishis, in chapter 15, the Rambam says that a person shouldn't force their wife, and to quote him, Ella ber daita, only with her mind, ubitoich sicha v'simcha. Right, out of talk and simcha. And as well in the laws of Deis, in chapter 5, he says, Rambam says, with both of their willingness and b'simchasa. So the Rambam is a book of halacha. It's not a book of marital counseling. And the commentaries actually don't bring a specific source for this obligation that it should be b'simcha. So there are those who actually point to this Gemara, Yisamach ishta l'gar mitzvah, to give simcha to his wife. Now, even though elsewhere the Gemara actually mentions such a concept, the Gemara in Pesachim, folio 72, says, you're obligated to l'samech ishta. But a lot of the commentaries, a lot of the Rishonim learn that it means that not only in the times that a person that has an obligation to be with his wife, whatever that time is, once a week, or whatever, that once every 2 weeks, or twice a week, depending on different, the professions that the person does, and so on. But they learn that there's a mitzvah to engage in intimacy whenever he sees that she desires him. There's an obligation. That's what it means. That's how other commentaries typically learn. You're obligated. In other words, the biblical obligation of conjugal rights. A wife has certain rights. These are one of the rights of a wife, right? And the man is obligated to his wife. So it's not only in these set times, but rather whenever he sees that there's a desire, you're not allowed to afflict her and not make her happy. But over here, the Rambam actually never mentioned such a law. The Rambam never says that whenever he sees that she desires him, he's obliged to engage. Rather, the Rambam learns the Gemara literally. The Gemara over there in Pesachim, when it says a man is obligated to rejoice his wife, it means literally. You're obligated, a man is obligated, and it should be simcha. Simcha. Simcha is a big word, especially for those who study Chassidus. Simcha is simcha. Simcha means joy. In any event, that is that piece of Gemara. Let's see if we can get in another piece, another shiggle, before we call it an evening. The Gemara says, Amar Ababo. Was the previous statement from Rabbi Bo? No. Okay. Now we're going to learn 3 statements from Rabbi Bo. Right now we're going to do maybe 1 or 2, but Rabbi Bo now makes a few statements, all related to tzedakah. Amar Rabbi Bo said, remember we said the name Abba is a common name. Abba is another form of Abba. Rabbi Bo said, Amar Moshe l'fnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Moshe said before the Holy One, blessed is He, Ribono shel Olam, Master of the world, B'meh tarum keren Yisrael. How will the horn of Israel, the glory of Israel, be exalted? Amar Leib Kitisa. When you lift them up, and it's referring to specifically the passage which says that they should take the half a coin from all the Jews. And the word used over there is kisisa, when you lift up the Jewish people. In other words, you're asking how we're going to lift up the Jewish people. Hashem responded, we're going to lift up the Jewish people by taking tzedakah from them. So, first off, the Rebbe learned something incredible from this. And he said that the Gemara here is hinting that when you see a Jew who gives tzedakah, you have to spread his name far and wide. You have to put up a plaque. You have to make a big deal. You have to make the person an honoree. You got to honor such a person, and so on. And that's what the Gemara means, that what will glorify, how will a Jew be glorified? Through giving tzedakah. And this is based on a famous tshuva of the Rashba, a famous response of the Rashba. The Rashba was one of the greatest rabbis from 800 years ago. Shlomo ben Aderes. And the Rashba said, famously, mitzvah lefarsem oisem mitzvah. There's a mitzvah to spread the name, to spread the word about the doers of mitzvahs. It's a mitzvah. And so this is an idea that hinted to in this Gemara. Okay, in other words, how do you get honor? But on a deeper level, the question can be asked: when's Moshe Rabbeinu having this conversation with God? After the giving of the Torah. The Jews are already on such a high level. The Jews are already called a nation of priests and a holy nation. And what's Hashem's response? How are the Jews going to be uplifted to a whole new level that we never even imagined? Hashem said, what's Hashem's response? That give tzedakah. Tzedakah was around even before the giving of the Torah. Right? What's so special? All right, especially after Hashem gave the Torah, they have this special mitzvah. You're giving tzedakah. What's it all about? So the explanation is, as explained, is that our sages say that Moshe Rabbeinu was shocked. How could this coin make such a difference? And it says that Hashem showed him a coin of fire. What does that mean? That means Rabbi Abba was not just talking about regular tzedakah. He means something special. When you give the tzedakah with a koch and with a fire, with a vodka, with a special warmth, and it's so much fire that you're infusing the coin with the fire. The coin gets on fire. What does that mean practically? What that means is like this. What's special about fire is that fire is one of the few physical objects which doesn't have a set form. Everything has a form. But fire, it's always burning and it's always moving in every direction. You'll never catch it in a form. And what's interesting actually is that a coin is the exact opposite. Even halachically, the value of the coin is the engraving, is the form, is the engraving that you put on top of the coin. What does it mean to be on fire? Right. So basically, there's many reasons and ways that a person can give tzedakah. A person can give tzedakah because they have a midah taiva, they have a good trait in their heart. They're naturally a good person. Or it makes sense to the person that the world should be running this way. I should be giving tzedakah, especially when a person is Jewish. Famously, the Gemara says that Jews naturally have this compassion within them. So, of course, it's going to be very strong by them. But that, of course, is going to be a person is taking their form. They're following their nature, right? This is who I am. I feel this way. I'm following my nature. There's very much it's very much a limited amount of giving also. It's philanthropy. It's giving. It makes me feel good. And even a higher level than that form of tzedakah is, they're giving it because Hashem said I should give. God Almighty said I should give tzedakah. I'm giving tzedakah. But even over there, at the end of the day, within that, there's many levels. A person's doing it for the reward, right? And then there could be physical reward, there could be spiritual reward. And even if the person's not doing it for reward, but that in itself excites them. That I want to be connected to God, and therefore I'm accepting the yoke of heaven, and I'm doing illogical things, and I'm giving tzedakah, and I'm going against everything natural, and I'm listening to Hashem. But really what took the Jews to the next level, and Moshe was shocked, he said, wow, how will the Jews, so how will the Jews be brought to a level that they can't even begin to fathom? The greatest completion of a Jew is like when the Rambam describes and says, you do the truth because it's the truth, not for any reason, not for any explanation, not for any accomplishment, not for anything it's going to do for you, not even that it's going to connect you with Hashem. You do the truth because it's the truth. In other words, you see yourself as a conduit for the divine, for the Almighty, for God. You do it because you're a Jew, and you're just identifying with Hashem. Hashem is a giver, so you're a giver. That's just the way it is. And this is the form of tzedakah, which doesn't have a form. That's why it's a coin of fire. The coin doesn't have a form but you're actually giving a coin. But it's coming in a way. It's coming from a fire that doesn't take a form. You're not limited in any way. That's why the tzedakah is not given in a limited way. And this, of course, explains why Rabbi Bo is arriving in the middle of our discussion to mention this concept. Because it's exactly what we were just talking about. If Fazer, Mamin Lanim, giving away money to Aniyim, where a person, it's not based on their limited feelings of how I feel right now and whether my ego demands this or that. No, you just see yourself as a giver. You see yourself as a divine being and God as a giver. And therefore, I'm a conduit for the divine. And that is a statement of Rabbi Abahu. And like I said in the outset of the class, this class was in its origin is a 6-part series. This is number 6. We'll see moving forward. Everyone stay in touch with each other and look in the Chabad email or whoever else you're in contact with for any future developments. But it's been a very special honor and a schus until this point. And this is all schus, and the neshama is flying in Gan Eden, and Avraham Shmuel and Aryeh Leib, and it's a tremendous schus. And in fact, the continuation of the next Gemara, which hopefully we'll be learning together, is where the Gemara talks about when a person passes away and goes to Lamaila, they say, Ashley Misha Balakan v'Talmud b'yadeh. Fortunate is the one who comes here with his learning in his hand, with the Torah that he learned in his hand. And I mentioned this actually one of the first classes that we gave, that it's a fascinating thing that I was in the middle of this page, Yud, 10th page, the folio 10 above Abasha. And on this page, Yud Amid Beis, which normally doesn't take this long to get through. But when you're teaching a class and you're discussing, then it takes much longer. But basically, we were just a few lines away before he passed away from learning this Gemara. And we had learned tractates together and so on. And divine providence, this was the piece of Gemara, this page of Gemara that we were holding at. The Gemara says, "Ashli Misha Balakan with Talmud b'yadeh." Fortunate is the one who comes here with Talmud b'yadeh. And specifically, we had learned the Ein Yaakov together for the last 2 years, and now we're continuing to discuss him and discuss his family, and he should be a good advocate for everyone, for his family and for the community.
Amen.
And
Amen.
Question and comment.
Amen.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Amen. Thank you.